Today we're testing the dumpling of the sneaker world, the Yeezy 450s, by cutting them apart, burning them, and running some super scientific tests on them to find out the truth about these shoes, because you just can't trust sneakerhead hype, and you especially can't trust these big hype brands. So the first thing I want to test is this prime knit upper, because this is a pretty interesting material, and in the 350 video we learned it's maybe not the most durable, but it does flex really interestingly, and it's made in a really unique way where it's basically just made in one single piece. So let's cut this apart and see what's going on underneath of it, because it feels a lot thicker than the 350s. Now that we got it split, the reason it feels thicker is because it's double layered. The 350s just had a single layer of that prime knit. This one has an inner lining layer as well. So if we take a measurement of those, the outer layer is 1.5 millimeters, the inner layer is 1 millimeter. So the outer layer is the same as the 350s, but you get the extra added, maybe some extra durability from that lining, but it might not be quite as breathable. So let's quickly do a little fog test, a little breathability test, and we already did it, so I'll put it over here. And as you can see, compared to the 350s, the 450s is still really breathable, but it just doesn't spew out and it doesn't leak out quite as much as the 350s. So maybe not quite as breathable as the 350s, but it's still a knit upper, so it's gonna be fairly breathable, especially compared to leather and some of these other multi-layered constructions. But does it unravel as easily as the 350s? Now that I'm pulling on this, the lining doesn't really add any structure to it. The thing that really makes it structurally sound is these little claws, these little fingers that go up the side of the shoe. It looks like they're fused all the way through the inside, binding those two layers together. Just that alone makes this shoe not quite as susceptible to fraying and completely unraveling like the 350s. But obviously if you did it at the toe here, it'd probably still do the same thing. And now let's see if this is a synthetic material or some sort of natural material like cotton by burning it. It's mostly just because it looks cool. And what I'm looking for when I'm burning this is how it reacts to the flame. If it curls up, it starts melting and spitting, it's usually synthetic. If it just burns and starts acting like a candle wick, then it's usually a natural material. But this one's clearly synthetic because of how it reacts and how it smells, more importantly. Because you can tell the difference between the smell of the synthetic versus natural, because it'd be really cool if they did a Yeezy out of natural materials, like some really natural rubber and a cotton upper or something like that. I think it'd be really cool. Let's see how easy this is to pull off these claws, because that was a comment that we saw in the last video, like, is it gonna start splitting as soon as these get creased and I start wearing them? So we'll just do a quick finger test first to see if we can just peel this off, because you'd be surprised how many shoes you can actually just rip apart with your bare hands. But I can't get it to tear apart. It's pretty well glued on there or fused in there. And off screen, we did a quick heat gun test to see if we could heat this material up to maybe loosen the glue or whatever's holding it on, to see if it'll come loose. And as you can see, it just wasn't coming loose. So I'd have no worries at all about these claws separating or splitting or kind of peeling away. They're really well stuck on there. Now let's figure out the structure of these claws. A lot of people were theorizing that they were hollow. So let's cut one of these and see if it actually is hollow. So it looks like it's just foam all the way through, it does kind of feel hollow, I guess, but it's clearly just foam. So if we take a durometer test, the Shore A durometer test, it basically tells us how squishy or how hard the material is. The outside of the claws are 45, 46. The inside of the claw is between 20 and 25, and obviously it tapers, so that changes the test results, but it is a significantly softer foam than it feels on the outside. And I'm assuming it's the same foam that goes all the way through the midsole, but I guess we'll see when we get it cut in half. And now, while we're on the claws, destroying just for fun, let's see what it does when you put the flame to it. So, starts bubbling and it just kind of starts melting. It looks like it's almost like you're melting ice. That's really interesting, because when we did the boost on the inside of the 350s, it kind of slowly melted and turned really sticky. This almost turns into a liquid, which is kind of wild. So another question that people were asking was, how durable is this outsole? So we rigged it up in our very scientific puncture test, and as you can see, it is fairly puncture resistant, and it's surprising because it doesn't feel like it's that dense. But if we do a durometer test on the outsole, it's about 60. So it is a pretty tough rubber. But I think maybe just the foam underneath makes it feel a lot softer than what it is. And a lot of times I think that elasticity of some of these rubber compounds helps prevent puncturing, because it just stretches down rather than just letting it pierce through. And now one question that I don't think was in the comments, I think we just were questioning it when we first got these shoes, because these eyelets They're just prime knit. There's nothing, it doesn't look like there's anything on the inside, so let's hurry and cut one of these eyelets to see. So yeah, it's just prime knit. So that makes me wonder if you wore these for a really long time and these shoelaces were slowly wearing away at this prime knit, would it slowly rip through these eyelets? So we rigged up a quick test to test that. And as you can see, it did take quite a bit of force to rip those out. Maybe if this was not just a hype sneaker that was a prime knit upper, because you're not really using these shoelaces. But I think if you're actually needing these shoelaces to keep the shoe tight on your foot, I'd be majorly concerned about that. So maybe if you get these, just don't tie them super tight, because these laces are known to wear through the brass eyelets in boots. So now to the questions that we had in the comment section that were super scientific. Does it float? So we put it in our little float tank, it floats. And then on the floating subject, we had a question that asked, can the 450 float on a pond at a party with a candle in it? As you can see, not really. So I don't know what that's for, but if you're considering using it for that, maybe not the best shoe. People also wanted to see the Cactus Test after the desert boot video, and as you can see, it popped it pretty easily, so don't be kicking cactuses in the shoe. Maybe not the best idea, but it's silly, but also it is important sometimes to know how puncture resistant your shoes are, because if you're planning on wearing these in places where you don't want to get little things on the inside, or if you're working around knives or sharp things and you drop it, it's not going to take much for this knife to go all the way into your toe. And then for the final test, people were concerned about, what if I was standing on hot concrete for a few hours in Las Vegas or something, or LA? Would the outsole melt? So we put it on a little bit of a stove top, heated up to 100 to 140 degrees, and nothing really happened. So we left it on there for a while, cranked up the heat, and at around 160, it started to melt. So you really shouldn't be too concerned about this shoe melting to the asphalt. As far as we can tell, it's not really a big issue. So now we've got all that preliminary information out of the way. Let's dig into this thing and figure out what's on the inside and how this shoe is built, because it's a really odd shoe. So let's cut it in half. Okay, we got it chopped in half, and it was really interesting how this prime knit curls up once you release the tension that's in it. But let's see what's inside. So now we can clearly see that the midsole and the claws are one single piece of foam that wraps all the way underneath the shoe up to the other side of the claws. And we can see this is probably, it's got to be the most simple sneaker that I've ever cut it apart and ever really seen that was mass produced on a real level, because it's really only made of 4 pieces. You've got this prime knit upper, and that goes all the way underneath the footbed. It's not strobo stitched like the 350s where it stopped right at that lasting board underneath the insole. It wraps underneath the insole and continues up the other side. Then you've got all this foam is a single piece foam midsole, the rubber outsole, and the 4th piece is the shoelaces. So really 3 pieces, but it only takes 4 pieces to make this entire shoe, which I think is really cool, especially coming from more of a work boot background where we dissected that pair of Nicks and it had 80 nails in just one single boot. So the fact this has 4 pieces is pretty cool. And here's the thing, there's no glue in this shoe at all. There's not, I don't think they use any glue, and if they do, the only bit of glue is to glue on this outsole, but I think it might be part of the injection molding process to attach that outsole. So how do they do this? This is a really interesting part, because they stitch that single piece prime knit upper, and then they slide in a last, which is essentially just a foot shape to whatever shape the shoe is going to end up looking like. But how do they attach the midsole? This is where it's really cool, because usually they'd glue it on or they'd stitch it on, but this is injection molded, where they have this 2 or 3 piece mold that they put that last with the sock on it into, and they inject liquid hot, basically boiling foam into that injection molding process, let it cure, let it bubble up, and in that mold, it shapes these claws, it shapes the midsole, and then I'm not really sure how the outsole gets attached. It's either glued on really, really well, or it's part of the molding process. And this style of construction is ridiculously durable and hard to peel apart, because we've seen it with boots where we've got a cemented boot with glue and an injected boot. The injected boots are nearly impossible to tear apart because it fills every nook and cranny, versus the glue is just a light surface, and it doesn't actually bind the layers. It just it acts as a binding agent. Whereas this, if you look really, really closely, you can actually see the prime knit underneath that little bit of layer of foam. So the foam isn't just on the surface of the material, it's fused all the way through those fibers and comes all the way to the inside of the shoe. And you almost can't calculate how much surface area this foam is attached to. It's almost like this shoreline paradox. It's almost immeasurable because it's infused in every single strand of the upper. And another really cool thing to note is if you look at the heel, you can see the mold flashing, which is the little leftover bits of foam that was just barely squeezed through where those metal molds come together. So this was at least a 2-piece mold. So is it worth the $200 price point that these came out at? Well, 200 bucks seems pretty steep, you know, especially for only having 4 main components to make this entire shoe. But I think this really unique style of construction and the fact that you have to make giant molds for it, and this prime knit upper is a single piece that's double layered, and that it's made in Germany. I'm just assuming that the wage costs in Germany are a lot higher than India and China, where some of the other Yeezys are made. I think $200 is maybe not as high as it seems. I still think you're maybe paying like that 20 to 25% higher premium because it is a Yeezy. But I think if Nike came out with this exact shoe, it would still be probably that $150 to $200 price point. So overall, what do I think of this shoe? Well, I think it's pretty ugly and surprisingly uncomfortable. It's really narrow, and the heel kind of sits really far forward, so you always feel like you're like rocking on your heels, but also kind of love it. But as we've seen in some of the other Yeezys, it seems like they're purposefully made not to fit into your comfort zone. And that's probably what made Yeezy so popular. And that pushing out of the comfort zone seems to be what Kanye does with everything, whether it's music, style, politics, relationships, social media. Kanye is one of those guys that's just always pushing the envelope for better or for worse, because it's not the safe way to do it. Most designers out there would just design what's safe. He really pushes the envelope, and half the time it flops, half the time it doesn't. But when it hits, it's a home run. So that basically wraps up Yapril, but we're almost to 500,000 subscribers. So help me get to that 500,000 mark, and we'll cut apart a Yeezy of your guys' choosing. So let me know what you want me to cut apart for that 500,000 subscribers celebration video, which Yeezy you want me to cut apart, and consider subscribing to help us get to that point, because that's the only way we can afford to do these ridiculously priced shoes and start debunking some of this long-held sneakerhead truths and hype, and also discover some of these really interesting aspects of shoe construction that you might not have ever seen. So let me know what you guys think, and thanks to research assistant Caulin for helping with the videos, and thanks to you guys for watching. See ya.